Welcome to Insights in Sound, where we talk to the people behind the scenes, behind the technology, and behind the music. People you may not know, but you should. And please check out getitinwriting.net/shows for a full list of our podcast YouTube series.
My guest is Dr. Kelly Snook. She is a musician, producer, scientist, technologist, inventor, educator, researcher, serial chronic overachiever. I don't know. I don't even know where to start. As I was just telling you off camera, your career has been about as circumlocucious as anybody's could possibly be, and you've really been kind of dabbling in all sorts of stuff. You spent 20 some odd years as a NASA researcher, scientist. You have always been a musician as well. You worked for several years with musician Imogen Heap and invented the Memu, which is a glove that is a MIDI controller and expressive device. You've done some fascinating work. I guess the one thing that I found that was really interesting to me was that you quote some of your major influences as Da Vinci, whom I totally share, Copernicus, Kepler, and Pythagoras.
Mainly Kepler, but yes.
Yeah, yeah. So can I just start by saying, whoa. I want to dig into your background a little bit because part of what really is interesting to me is, I'm always fascinated as one artist to another with the whole left brain, right brain balance thing. And your left brain, right brain thing is really, it's probably more well balanced than most. I mean, a lot of musicians, we have some left brain in terms of like learning our instrument and stuff, but the whole urge for musicians is to go right-brained as much as possible. So to lose oneself in that whole creative sphere. And you are really pretty analytical in certain things, obviously. You started out as a musician. What drew you between the science and the math and the music and everything? How did you start seeing the melding of those in your life? Or did you?
No, I never felt them as separate things. And also, if I'm honest, I'm just putting I can hear myself better now. It was fear, 100%, just fear and willpower.
Fear of what?
I don't, well, like, when I was just doing what came naturally, it was mainly playing music and swimming. But then when they make you feel like you have to choose what to do with your life, and I just instinctively really recoiled from the idea of having to go into a field where your livelihood was required luck or required like really heavy discipline with no guarantee that discipline would convert into anything like reliable or substantial. And then most of all, I didn't want to like I knew that I knew that my sense of purpose was very closely aligned with music, but I didn't at the time, when I was making these life choices, 16, and that was the 80s. And the kinds of things I'm doing now just didn't exist. It wasn't like I could look at what I'm doing now and say, I want to do that, because this didn't exist. So I knew that I didn't want to, I had a real sense of reverence around music, and anything to do with like monetizing that was really distasteful to me. And I didn't want to ruin, I guess, my experience of music by burdening it with the need to make a living from it. My parents were both musicians, and we were very poor, and so I saw this as a really difficult path. And um, especially my dad, he was a my biological father was a singer songwriter, and um, he was enormously talented, but not the kind of talented that converts into success in the narrowly defined terms of success in that world. And
90% of
so,
musicians.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I didn't like that at all. I didn't want to deal with that at all. I did have by that time a stepfather who was in the more like invention realm. He is the inventor of the first analog pitch follower for
Oh,
analog
wow.
synthesizers, and he's a real pioneer in electronic music and entrepreneur. And like Bob Moog bought his little boards, and he taught me to solder when I was 13. So that actually did introduce the kind of what became a more like mainstream path for me. But he was really on the fringes of what was possible in the early days. So yeah, that's a long way of saying I didn't really necessarily see them as different, but I was allergic to commercialized music and those paths that seemed available that were obvious. Like one another option would have been to be a concert pianist because I was I'd been playing piano since I was a little girl. I also played oboe. When I was a really little girl, I wanted to play oboe in the Boston Pops Orchestra. That was my goal. Um, yeah, but in the end, I chose aerospace engineering because it was easier than music.
Okay. I will ignore the ludicrousity of the ludicrosity. I don't know. I will ignore just how ludicrous that statement sounds. But I get it
I
because
think if you're a musician, it doesn't sound ludicrous.
no. The
If
only part
it,
that sounds ludicrous is I chose being a NASA engineer because it was easier. But
well, I
but
mean, it really is.
yeah, because it's very
It really is.
it's there's much less of what's nebulous in it in that.
Exactly.
I totally get that. It's and also I really get the idea of the whole the compromise that we all wrestle with between the artistic and the commercial within the musical realm. And that
Yeah.
there is, yeah, it's the old joke about, can I be a musician when I grow up? Well, you can't do both, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I get it, but
Yeah.
it's also interesting that you had that influence at the right time to
Mm,
lead you toward the whole idea of technology.
mm, yeah. Yeah, it seemed like yeah, it's always been this balance between technology and I mean, I guess I did have I really had a kind of a love. I wouldn't say talent, that would take it too far, but a love for science and definitely engineering. I'm an engineer at heart, I think. So, but I do think that even music, like even just if I would have chosen just straight music path from the beginning, I think there is very much a very strong technical element to music making,
No
and
doubt.
um,
No doubt.
that really appeals to me about it. I like the fact that it came back to it through technology, but I feel like that really suits my brain for sure.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, I mean, first of all, music is so mathematical in so many ways,
Yeah,
And then, if you think about how many of these brilliant inventors were also musicians, Da Vinci comes to mind there. Um, but, I think you discovered early on, and I ran across I think a paper that you had written, something that you had written where you were talking about the whole idea of the older, the ancient civilizations' views of music. And
yeah,
that really sucked me in because there's this whole, sort of almost, um, almost hippie vibe kind of thing about, well, it's all vibrations, dude, you know. But in a sense, it really is. And
Yeah.
you've really tied a lot of those things together. And I'd really like to hear more of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think I tied them together. I think that I untied them. Because as you said, like there was definitely a period in our human history where music was considered one of the sciences, it was one of the quadrivium, it was not an art, it was not for self-expression, it was not for marketing, it was not for selling things, it was not for making money, it was for investigating reality in the same set of tools as arithmetic, geometry, and astronomy. And the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music, these were the four sciences. And if you think about what is arithmetic, the study of number, what is geometry, it's number in space. What is astronomy, it's number in space and time. And what is music, it's number in time. So the idea of using music as a science, this has been lost in our modern world. So I'm really looking to build a world where we unlose that, where we can bring that back as one of the purposes of music and be able to actually use it that way. We don't have currently the tools that allow us to use it that way. We have a lot of tools for using it for fun and to feel good. And it's really good for that too. Music is good for that too. Music is absolutely has been developed as an art and it makes us feel good. It brings us together. It does all sorts of really yummy, delicious things. But I think the most yummy, delicious thing is it is a another tool for understanding our realities. And that also sounds hippie, but I really am looking for ways to talk about it and ways to build tools that aren't hippie, that aren't this kind of new age vibes, good vibes. Not there's nothing wrong with that, but I think that also really undermines the levity, the gravity of this avenue of exploration that we have as humanity.
Makes it
So
intangible.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
that
I feel like it kind of it if we just talk about it as like there is a whole kind of finger of people that are looking at music for healing, like the sound baths and that
yes,
sort of thing.
chakra
Um,
tuning and stuff like that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I think that is almost as limiting for it as the way that we use it in, say, like commercial pop music or whatever. I really feel like it doesn't actually scratch the surface of what's possible with music for us and for our understanding of ourselves and each other and the world and all the whole harmony of the spheres, harmony, musica mundana, musica humanis, um, these ideas that are so old but almost forgotten. I think there's a little bit of dabbling here and there on the music of the spheres at least, and then the whole music healing um, kind of component is is the musica humana kind of like realm. But I'm interested in building an instrument or a worlds, whatever we call it, a platform where all of that is in in scope, um, and we can explore with our ears and with our minds and with our hearts and everything all together, and also with our with our money. And I'm
And
really
that's the
interested
engineer in
in
you as well.
yeah.
The engineer in you is seeking some kind of tangible approach to this, which I really applaud because, as you say, a lot of the way that it has been implemented is very because it's hippie, quote unquote, it's much less tangible and we can't really approach it, when we're talking about a lot of healing and even when we talk about, musicology and musical psychology and the way music impacts the brain, a lot of it is it's hard to really define. And what you're trying to do is, I think, kind of kind of put it into a place where we can actually approach it from a research perspective
Mm.
or from an engineering perspective. And that's fascinating to me because I don't think that most people are really doing that.
Oh, no, there's no money in it right now. So that is why
Oh, so you're
I
back to where
think
you would have been with as a musician, making no money.
exactly.
But at
But
least you're doing it for
I
science.
still have the sacredness. I still have that like
There you go.
purity
Yes. You're still
of approach.
non-commercial.
Yes. Yes.
But no, it really is interesting how you're blending these because I think the approach of trying to trying to actually quantify a lot of this is I mean it's fascinating. I'm not sure how you do it, but I think if anybody can do it, you can.
Well, I won't, I can't do it by myself. So
No, of
I've just
course.
been slowly collecting people who are helping. A couple years ago, I met someone who had seen my talk. I gave a keynote address at the ADC Audio Developers Conference in
I think
2020
I remember that. Yeah.
during the pandemic. So it was online, and so the video was available, and they actually invested quite a bit in the video presentation of these talks, which was great for me because I don't really have a lot of materials about what it is I'm trying to do yet. And so this person that came to me, he has invented an entirely new way to think about actually like a whole new music theory, which is not easy to do after hundreds and hundreds of years of music theory. Like he has come up with a new way to think about music, which it was like I didn't really get it the first time he came to me, but then we had a conversation about my instrument Concordia and his work, and I was like, oh, this person really deeply understands what it is that I'm trying to do, and he's doing stuff like on his own. He's not at any university. He's not affiliated with any company. He's like an independent researcher pursuing truth, like um, in a way that I'd never seen before. Like these are the people like him are the people like Kepler and Copernicus, and you know
Spirit animals.
he's a Canadian. He's like a Canadian music theory researcher, but also like a very accomplished jazz musician, multi instrumentalist, but completely outside of commercial music, which is it's just amazing. And so, finding people like this and starting to let the ideas percolate between brains rather than just in my own brain.
Hmm.
Um, it's a process that's not um, it's not systematized yet
Well,
as a
but it's like
process
playing
for
with other
developing things.
musicians. It's like playing with other
It
musicians.
is.
You know,
It
the
is. Yeah.
interchange of those ideas, I think, is that's what
Yeah.
motivates us. Talk about
Yeah.
Concordia a little bit. I wanted to get into that. Tell me about it.
Well, it's like if you can imagine like a multiplayer simulation game, like a game. If you imagine a like a VR game,
Hmm.
uh, maybe you might imagine something like Minecraft or World of Warcraft or a multiplayer game where you're in world. There are other better games to put into your head, but if you're aware of any of this idea of there being these virtual worlds that you can go into and create inside, for example, like in Second Life or in what are some of the other worlds? Second Life is a good
Hmm.
example where
Second
you
Life
can,
is actually a good example. Yeah.
or Decentraland. Decentraland is actually better because Decentraland is like a set of worlds with districts and governments and like um, ownable land. Like it's really kind of the next level of decentralized in world experiences. And inside of Decentraland, you can have games, but you can also have just like movie theaters and
Oh, wow.
amusement parks and whatever you would have in the real world. So this is kind of like Concordia is like a mashup of a modular synthesizer and a VR game and a planetarium, I guess,
Wow.
where like people can come up with interesting ways to map any kind of data, let's say DNA or the planets and the way the planets move. Starting with the planets is really exciting for me because it's already immediately
Your wheelhouse.
musical. We have so much information and it's already music. So what could be better? So like imagine the whole solar system built to scale dynamically. So it's everything and it is moving. And then all of those parameters mapped to what you see and also what you hear, music. So you're literally hearing the music of the spheres, um, where everything that you're hearing and everything that you're seeing is actual information. And then you have the ability and the agency to interact with that information. So through some kind of interactivity that can also just be arbitrarily designed. And so it's like a game, except that the worlds that you're exploring are created by real data, real systems. You could be exploring your DNA, you could be exploring the solar system, you could be exploring the stock market, whatever it is, the way that you are like say flying through it or plucking it or mashing it up or whatever the interactions. I'm doing this a lot because I imagine controlling it with my hands, with the gloves, with the Mimi gloves as one of the controllers, but you could imagine just having a phone and some headphones or a VR headset, or you could imagine being in a planetarium where everything was being displayed around you. But I think one of the key properties of Concordia is that it's modular and that people can build new worlds inside the platform. So in the same way that you would have a modular synthesizer where people can, with a Eurorack synthesizer, anybody can build a Eurorack module. They can even put the instructions for how to build that module online and other people can just build it themselves. There's this real DIY culture around modular synthesizers. If you don't know what a modular synthesizer is, it's a little harder to imagine. But like then you put these patch cords between, or you route the audio between these different modules, and that affects the music in some way. So in the same way, Concordia is modular in that people can build whole new worlds. And if you have the right, say, input devices, let's say there would be worlds where you would really need some kind of gestural controller to play it. Then you can go into these worlds and you can play them. You can also, if you're a computer scientist, you can contribute to the instrument. I'm just calling it an instrument because I don't know what else to call it. The game, the instrument, by programming new modules. If you're a hardware designer, you can create controllers for either getting data into interacting in the system, or on the output side, if you wanted to say output the sound and the visuals with physical things instead of with like projectors and speakers, that's also possible. So it's really kind of this open-ended modular game system, I guess, for lack of a better word. And then on top of that is a whole economy, like a blockchain, decentralized computing infrastructure that keeps track of who's doing what and when, and monetizes or attributes value or extracts value according to their interactions with it. So like if you're going in and you're creating a piece of music and that piece of music is being like kind of others are riding along with you and experiencing that, then you're creating value and they're extracting value. So a whole value system that rewards people for just being there, not based on the output of what they create, not like commoditizing output to be bought and sold like records or like art, pieces of art, but really valuing the creative process and with actual value, actual money.
And motivating it in that sense too, I guess.
Yeah, totally. So what it's motivating is creativity. It's also motivating excellence and rewarding excellence. But in a way that can't be gamed. And this is a very, very difficult problem that no one has solved yet either. So, like the whole economic element of Concordia is not just a side note. It's really central to having it work the right way. Um, like I expect we would use some sort of blockchain technology to say verify that the data that's being used to create modules is real data, is correct. Or, and like, because you can imagine there would be a new spacecraft that goes to Mars or whatever, and it sends back all of this data that needs to be verified. If somebody wants to build a Concordia module based on those data, then somebody needs to, or probably in a decentralized way, like validate that data. So there would be all this validation infrastructure and
But it's an ethos.
off-chain
It
data.
maintains an ethos in a way, doesn't it? It maintains a certain authenticity and integrity
Yeah,
that
yeah.
which is kind of cool because I think, if I think about the hopes we had for the internet, and how it has been sort of manipulated and commercialized in so many ways, this seems to almost be a guardrail against that.
Yeah, well, I hope so. I don't know. I mean, that's why
Yeah.
I'm happy with it moving really slowly
Hmm.
because the typical way that this something like this would be developed is some company or some set of companies or some investment um, engines would get their fingers into it, and then all of those agendas would be tied to it. And I'm really interested in keeping it free from all of that. So that means that without a whole huge budget to support it, it's quite it's like a life's work, that result of which I may not see in my lifetime, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I just need to just stay focused on it and make sure that everything I'm doing is in service of that. And so people will ask me, well, what's going on with Concordia, and I'm like, well, it's mycelium that's just continuing to germinate,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
pop little mushrooms up here and there, but it's not a building. It's like a whole ecosystem, most of which is underground still.
Do you find that your work, not only with Concordia, but in general, you find that your work tends to connect a lot of the concrete with the nebulous? I mean, when we
Mm,
talk about stuff like music of the spheres, when we talk about um, the tuning of the body, the chakras, all of these, kind of um, foo-foo hippie arts that people, some people believe in, unfailingly, astrology, things like that, as opposed to
mm.
people who are much more tangible and left brain uh, binary in their approach, so to speak. Do you find that a lot of what you're doing kind of bridges those gaps?
Maybe, but I'm not a believer in those gaps.
Mm-mm.
I don't believe those gaps are there. So I do believe
That
that
answers the question.
people are clustering in certain like areas, but I think that's just like a product of our times and just collectively in our development as a human race. I think of this a lot. That's not a kind of, I don't know the word. That's not an intangible thing for me. Like I'm on a daily basis, I'm thinking about where we are in the evolution of our historic arc as a humanity. Like this is the level at which I'm thinking, and then I'm building for what's next for us as humanity, and we're not there yet. So I'm building a whole platform and an instrument for a society that doesn't exist. So I have to think like, where are we now? What will what will this, if we succeed and we don't completely extinguish ourselves, and I don't think we are going to completely extinguish ourselves, like what will be our modes of expression, and also our values um, in the future. I don't think there's any musical instrument or any instrument at all that can be built without thinking about values. So I'm thinking about our values as a human race um, and designing into that. So I think these gaps exist because people are drowning in two things. They're drowning in like false dichotomies that we've created. We've created so many false dichotomies in our current world, like that people are either musicians or they're not, or that people are singers or they're not, or they're dancers or they're not, or they're right-brained or left-brained. I actually think this is another false dichotomy. I don't
Agreed.
actually believe in that either. We've developed these models of thinking that don't serve us, and they definitely don't serve future us. So I'm literally trying to operate outside of those dichotomies. And so I'm not trying to tie things together. I'm not trying to bring together, say, art and science. Like, I think that that's ridiculous. Art and science are just kind of two cross sections through uh, worldviews that help us understand reality, which we actually can't understand anyway. So they're just like, they're the same thing. They're just at different angles, kind of thing. So you don't need to find intersections because they're always intersected. Um,
You remind me
and
of a uh, back in the 1970s. There was a gentleman named Stuart Brand who put together the whole Earth catalog.
yeah,
There's the
yeah,
famous back cover of the whole Earth catalog is a photograph of planet Earth, and the caption says, "We can't put it together; it already is together."
exactly,
And I think what you're
exactly.
talking about
Yeah,
there, when you talk about like people being right-brained or left-brained, I agree with you. It's not people being that way. It's certain functions are more left brain dominant, more right brain, but we all have that in us. And I've always been
yeah,
fascinated by the fact that so many um, artists of varying stripes are also musicians, and so many musicians are also dabble in so many other things because we are by nature multifaceted, and the more we open ourselves to that creative process, the more we let that stuff in. And I
yeah,
mean, I think you're right. I think there's probably a lot of causes for it, but humans tend to kind of become binary in their choices, maybe just because it's easier, maybe because it's harder to see nuance. I don't know, but you're right. There is hardly ever a one or the other. There's always this kind of blending of all of them, and I think it's really interesting to be
yeah.
approaching it that way.
Mm. Yeah, it can be uncomfortable, the nuance, because it's a much more comfortable place to be able to put things in boxes
You know,
and what things being one or the other. And I think you gotta be willing to be like sitting in the uncertainty of the nuance if you're going to explore those territories. Um, I do think that once certain like very basic elements of Concordia are built, there will be enough there that will give people the like visceral experiential understanding that science and art and music and all of these things are not separate. Or that like we even have disciplines in art, which is I don't think is going to happen so much in the future. We're not going to be able to separate dance from music, from visuals, from like music and visuals will be so tied that there we won't have these kind of very purified, siloed artistic practices. I don't think very commonly. We're already seeing it, but we're kind of ignoring it. Like it's not really the reality, but I think it really is the reality that human expression will be so much more fluid than it has been in the past, and also
so
much less centralized.
I hope so.
Um,
I mean, I can see a lot of the capability, and it's interesting now to see a younger generation coming up that's been completely raised on the internet and on a lot of the possibilities of that, because there is really almost an acceleration of the brain being able to integrate all of these different aspects. I mean, for me
yeah,
as a musician who then started integrating video into my work, I started seeing the same thing, that there's this infinite capacity within each of us to not have to focus on one thing. And it's that whole it's that whole idiot savant thing of, we can hone in on one thing and really focus on it, and then all of a sudden there's something way over there, and we somehow or another we focus our attention and hone in on something else, and we somehow or another meld those within our brains.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like the mm, the boxes that we've in past generations have circumscribed around different realms of activity and the inertia required to produce anything or to make anything in the past is like that doesn't exist now. And these kids that make TikTok videos or collaborate with each other in real time or asynchronously, but really fast, whole new like movements of dance and music and video that and ways of using computing power. They don't even think about it. Like there's so little inertia associated with making. They're just making. It's like this. There's no filter almost. There's lots of filters, and there's no there those barriers that existed for us don't exist for them. So we tend to like when we're talking to each other or when we're reflecting on the path, like sort of diminish that as a cultural revolution, but it really is a cultural revolution. It's a whole new way of thinking about creative outlets and of thinking about how even to monetize it. They're figuring that out for with amongst themselves, you know. And as soon as as soon as the big things crumble, that's where we'll see um, then really a new economy is being created out of these things. But as far as creativity goes, like they're not thinking about is this music or is this. They're not even caring if it's art. They're literally just creating and sharing it with each other immediately
Yeah.
and decentralized way. So they don't have to be co-located in time. They don't have to be co-located in space. They don't have to be co-located in age or race or gender or anything. Like there's no limits to those the human connections that are being created through art. And I do think that even and like TikTok and Instagram, these Snapchat even, these platforms are art. They are art, literally, because they are um, very compelling connect connections between humans doing creative things together or by themselves.
Yeah.
Either one, it's okay. You know?
The other thing that strikes me about it is I had a great conversation once with I believe you probably know him too, Craig Anderton, as a brilliant, brilliant individual. And Craig made a point of that a lot of younger musicians coming up are always concerned with how do I get this drum sound? How do I do that particular thing that's been done before? And I think what you're talking about is more of the what if perspective of what if I try this? What if and Craig's
Yeah.
example was, George Martin saying, what if I put a string quartet behind this skiffle band? But the idea of actually trying things that have not been tried, taking a tool that was meant for this and using it for that. Uh, I think there's a lot more of that going on now. And a lot of that is just because we have people who are being given tools that are so brand new that we don't even know what they can and can't do. But the idea of really
Mm,
that what if mentality is, to me, I think it's at the core of the creative process.
mm, yeah. And the all the power of asking what if is available to kids now in their hands and their phones. And this is changing everything, whether we like it or not. It really, really is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there's good and bad to it, no doubt. Uh, there's always there's always the veteran who says, "Oh, in my day we didn't do that," and stuff like that. And you have no respect for this or whatever, But on the other hand, there's so many breakthroughs that can come from approaching something with relative ignorance.
Mm, yeah,
You don't know the rules,
for sure.
you can break them.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
interesting.
we don't need songs to be 3 minutes long anymore. We don't need them to have a certain broadcast quality. We don't need any of those limitations that like we've been trying to teach kids how in music production or whatever, like how to master a song or how to. I don't know that that's gonna survive much longer. I don't even think it's going to be necessary, really, given the tools we have. Humans might be out of the loop altogether in some other areas. Um, so, yeah, I think we're going to see a completely different creative space even in the near future. We're already seeing it. So,
We
but
are.
definitely
We
in the
are.
far future. Yeah.
I mean, I still see a fascination among younger people to learn a lot of those rules and roots and techniques and everything, which I think,
Mm.
is right up there with studying the work of Copernicus or Da Vinci or whatever, learning to kind of understand where we came from. But
Mm.
yeah, I mean, it's I kind of like your approach of just throwing it all at the wall and seeing what sticks. It's more
I don't know if
fascinating.
that's my approach, but I think my approach is more like trying to picture um, the needs of the future
Hmm.
both socially and creatively and then reach forward with my fingers to those other like reach backwards with those fingers and forwards with my fingers and try and make them touch. That's my approach. I'm not just like trying everything. I'm like really looking at. I'm kind of intensively designing for the future, um, which requires a lot of thought, like philosophical thought, not just technical thought. In fact, much more philosophical thought than technical thought.
I would imagine so.
I'm
Yeah.
just imagining that anything's going to be possible technically. So I don't need to necessarily design the technology. I need to design the philosophy first and the economics.
Isn't that a bit
And then the
overwhelming?
techno.
I mean, you really
Yeah,
have
totally.
no boundaries in that sense.
Totally. It's totally overwhelming. But I think taking the pressure off having to have it done in any amount of time or deliver it to someone else. I'm not really delivering it to someone else. I'm letting it evolve philosophically without the pressure of delivering something prematurely. Like right now, society isn't ready, technology isn't ready. Technology is catching up fast though, which is great. So now I can at least talk about some of the ideas in the context of what has already been created.
Hmm.
Like VR exists, the blockchain exists. Blockchain tech there's not the blockchain technology, decentralized computing exists, computational power exists, AI exists. Um, all of these are technologies that are going to be really important and central. Like cryptocurrency exists, um, machine learning, and I guess that's AI, but like sensor technology, sensor networks exist, social media exists, games exist. These are all like kind of parallel pushes forward in technology that will be integrated in Concordia. So you could choose any one of them and spend a whole like several years shaving that yak of technology that needs to feed into um yeah into the final thing. So I'm happy just in a very non-linear way, um, keeping track of all the different technologies and how they're advancing with always keeping in mind that eventual goal philosophically of what it is we're trying to create.
Yeah, the ubiquity of a lot of these new technologies, how quickly they are becoming ubiquitous, I think is really
Yeah.
it's fascinating. And it goes back to that whole concept of future shock, where things just keep accelerating at this logarithmic rate, and it's I can understand why it scares some people because it is so without definition, without boundaries. It's completely unpredictable. Where do you go? Anywhere you want. There's no roads, there's no maps.
Yeah. it's interesting to see where they all go as a function of where the money is going.
Isn't it
Like you
always?
see so much more money going into visualization and visual representation of things, and visual art, for example, was happened before. Like the visual AI tools, the AI art tools start with the visual, and now the audio or the music ones are catching up. Or like in VR, so much computing power devoted to visual resources, very little development on the audio generation, audio synthesis side, for
Mm.
example. um, Audio is always trailing behind or as an afterthought, or it's like thrown away in a way. Like they just develop soundtracks for things instead of actually employing the audio in ways that could be really powerful. So yeah, I think the mismatched paradigms of development are mainly a result of money, where money can be made the
Which is
easiest and quickest.
unfortunately where it always goes. But,
Yeah,
there we have
yeah.
human nature in action.
Yeah, but I'm glad that money is going into these places.
Mm.
Like I don't know who put the money into that big, what's it called? The sphere in
Oh,
Vegas,
the sphere. Uh-huh.
the huge, like, what is it, 16K, like 360-degree dome.
Yep.
Like that needs to exist for Concordia. So somebody felt like there was an economic model around creating that, and it's mostly visual. But still, like, I'm glad that
Yeah.
this world is such that something like that is coming into existence, um, because all of that will help, I think, eventually.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Well,
want to go experience that,
oh, me
definitely.
too. Me too. Well, I think
Yeah.
I will probably go and see it very soon. You with your travels, you may be I don't
Yeah.
know. Um,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, but I mean, you are obviously very optimistic for the future, which is, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's refreshing because there's a lot of nihilism right now, I think.
Well, I mean, yeah, my optimism comes from my faith, and that and the teachings of Baha'u'llah that are pretty clear that like something of us is going to persist in the
Yeah.
future. I think it's very clear, even in, like, for example, in the Baha'i writings, that this could come about. Like we will actually reach a stage where we're operating as one humanity in peace. Um, the path to get there, though, like I would say I'm optimistic about the long-term future. I would say I'm actually quite um, realistic about the near-term future, especially in the US. So I have a lot of kind of what would might be seen as like sort of conflicting sensibilities around like what's happening in the world, because I see two processes happening simultaneously. I see the whole world order as we know it. Basically, the world as we know it is ending, I think. Um, it's crumbling. The world order is crumbling. It's completely unsustainable. Something's got to give. Multiple things are probably going to give. We might see environmental collapse. We might see the collapse of the dollar, which would completely transform our material world and the power dynamics in the world. And that is going to be rough times. I don't think that's going to be easy for anyone, but especially I think for Americans. This is just me, like, looking at the signs. And I think if we see the signs and the writing on the wall, we're headed into some pretty tough times. So I don't think, like, everything that I'm doing and thinking about is like I'm building a cathedral. Like in the old days, it would take 10 generations of people. It takes 300 years, 30 generations of people, 10 generations, 10
Mhm.
generations of people to build a cathedral in the early days. This is not like you draw up some plans and you build it and then you use it. It's like going up for generations,
Right.
300 years to build. That's, I'm building a cathedral. I'm like, we're building a cathedral, whoever's with me on
Mm.
it, like we're building for what's happening beyond the near term collapses that are probably likely going to happen. They're already happening. I mean, look at Gaza and look at everywhere. Look at the state of the United States, even, and the inequality that exists. It's like nothing about our current world is sustainable. So I'm not optimistic necessarily about
In the short term.
the,
Hmm.
our short term experiences,
Yeah.
either like even individually, but collectively, especially not optimistic about that, because we had our chance to get our act together and we just didn't do it. We didn't get there. And so I think we're going to be living the consequences of that failure for a few decades at least. And so probably like by before I die, we're still going to be in that state. So Concordia is like the cathedral that I'm helping to start. I'm like
Hmm.
helping to draw up the plans, basically. It's probably not going to be possible for it to exist until we get through this phase of our collective undoing.
I have a lot of thoughts about that, and I'm not sure where to even start, but that was pretty succinct. I don't know that I have much to add to that. I agree with it all. Um, I wish I didn't, but
Yeah,
yeah, I do.
yeah.
But ultimately, you are the eternal optimist, obviously, in terms of long-term future. And
Long term.
I have to agree with you. It's for the sake of humanity in that sense, and the creative process is so much a part of that. And I love the fact that you have opened that to a much bigger picture. That's
Mm.
yeah. So let me ask you to wrap this, sort of a question that I ask almost everybody, but from your particular perspective, it's very, very different. Um, you came up in a completely different time, completely different technological age, and with all of these
Wait,
changes,
are you calling me old, Daniel? Is that what just happened?
girlfriend, if you're old, I'm ancient, okay?
No,
So
I am old. I'm definitely like
we both are,
in that
we have, and,
category.
and that's, I think, to a certain extent, that gives us a different perspective. And
Yeah.
yeah, what I'm asking you is the same thing I ask myself a lot of times. Here we are having come up in this completely different era, and you and I are both among the people who have adapted to these changes, as opposed
Mm.
to I still don't know how to program my VCR. I mean,
Yeah.
we've basically embraced all this change, and we see
Well,
the beauty
actually,
of it.
I would say that we even helped create it.
Yes,
So,
well,
yeah.
absolutely. And at the same time, we have embraced it. We continue to work within it and use it. Um, and then you have this new generation that we were talking about that basically came up in it. What would you say to 15-year-old you coming up in this day and age?
Uh, I don't have an answer for that. That's the reason I'm not a parent. I, I, I wouldn't want to be 15 right now. Um, but honestly, I think I would say exactly what I would have said to the 15-year-old 40 years ago. Um, which is it's really important to just stay focused on it sounds super cliche, but stay focused on what it means to be good and how that manifests in the world and how you treat other people and how you value your own integrity, how you value others and um, and facilitate collaborations that are meaningful between people. Like all of that is what's important. It's not necessarily important what you do. It's so important how you do it. And I think this is what I didn't know when I was making the choice that I made when I went into aerospace engineering instead of music, which is that, things that are really important that will define your experience of success are the connections that you make with other human beings and your ability to move through the world in a way that helps other people. Because I think that's really where you feel the true value of your own life is in the interactions with other people. So I feel like I wouldn't focus at all necessarily on what you do. I would even not, I'm definitely not one of these follow your dreams kind of people. I feel like it's more about finding resonances that allow you to operate in an optimal state as a human being. And it's not about making money. It's not about following your dreams. It's not about making other people see you. I feel like today, in this day and age, fame is such an important element and motivator for young people, but I'm sure any of them that actually achieve it feel the emptiness of that. So I would just say it's really about defining for yourself, finding a framework for being good, and then prioritizing that.
I love that. Kelly Snook, thank you for being my guest.
Thank you for asking.
Absolutely fascinating. Hey, I'm Daniel Keller. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join us each week for Insights in Sound.